I'm just going to skip the intro. You all know why we're here at this point. Ben Simmons was not good at all for the 76ers during their series against the Atlanta Hawks. He really wasn't good this entire playoff run for them. In fact, he shot, well, let me put it this way. Embiid had, I think, more shots or just about as many shots and far more points in the first two games of the series than Ben had in the entire series itself. Let me pull up the stats right here. All right, so Ben Simmons scored 69 points on 45 shots during the entire series against Atlanta. Joel Embiid scored 79 points on 46 shots in Game 1 and Game 2 combined. So that's what we're looking at with Ben Simmons right now. So obviously people are hypothesizing that Morey is going to make some deals here this offseason. They're going to trade Ben Simmons away and find a star player who could help out Joel Embiid. And then the one everyone wants but probably will not get is Damian Lillard. So let's just go through some trade scenarios for Ben Simmons today. We'll begin with Damian Lillard. We'll work our way down the list from most desirable to least desirable in terms of the guys who they could trade for, guys who they are rumored to be trading for. Again, I don't think any of these are necessarily bound to happen. This is all just me kind of throwing ideas out there and you decide what's realistic or what's not. So we'll start with Lillard, which I think is more unrealistic, but again, you decide for yourself. This is one trade scenario for Lillard where it's just Dame coming over to Philadelphia, and you can see they have to send a lot of stuff back to get him. You might feel that Ben Simmons plus 3 first-round picks and a guy like Tyrese Maxey is too much. And if you feel that way, then you're not going to be able to trade for Damian Lillard. I mean, let's be honest. He's a top 10 player in the world right now. And if we had to make a list of where Ben Simmons ranks in the top players in the world today, I mean, are we even going to put him top 25? Are we going to put him top 30? We can't guarantee that. And Tyrese Maxey obviously is a young player. But they're going to need someone like that if you're going to ask for Damian Lillard, a guy who's going to score 30 points a night. And you know it's going to be an offensive bombshell. He's just going to do everything you need. And he's going to shoot threes from 10 feet beyond the arc and still hit them. So this is what you're going to have to give up if you want a player like Damian Lillard. And you just have to accept that. It's going to be way too much. And if you make this move, you're going to probably shoot yourselves in the foot if you don't win in the next 3 or 4 years. And then it's going to go back to being a whole other process all over again. So this is one hypothetical situation for Damian Lillard. Let me pull up a second one. This is the other one I drew up. It includes Derrick Jones Jr. to even out the money, and you probably like this one less. I like this one less for Philadelphia because it involves trading more players. You see Seth Curry gets added. Take out Maxey, put in Thibault instead. So give Portland some defensive options. Lillard still comes over along with Derrick Jones Jr. It's still 2 first-round picks. Basically, Thibault or Seth Curry, whoever you look at it, replaces one of the first-rounders. I like this one less for Philadelphia because you take on a player in Derrick Jones Jr. who really has not done much outside of his time in Miami. And again, Lillard, you're trading a lot, and you're going to have to trade a lot for him. But Seth Curry was phenomenal for them for Philadelphia in the playoffs. And you obviously want a guy like that to be back because you have Joel Embiid. The whole point is to surround Joel Embiid with shooters. So someone like Seth Curry certainly falls in that category. Thibault is a great defender. He's a little more expendable because he doesn't do as much on the offensive end. Maybe you take out Curry here, and somehow the trade still works monetarily. Well, it wouldn't work monetarily at that point. You would take Derrick Jones Jr. out as well. Maybe it was Ben Simmons for Thibault, Ben Simmons and Maxey. However you look at it. Plus 2 first-rounders instead of 3 first-rounders. Maybe that's more desirable for Philadelphia. Well, obviously it is. But like I said, it's going to be a lot, and you're not going to be comfortable with it. But you might start getting more and more comfortable with it as Damian Lillard plays for you and starts to rack up the points. So I think that's really how you have to look at it. Once you get Lillard on the team, suddenly the cost won't seem so extreme. So I'm going to pull up another one here who I think is highly desirable if you are Philadelphia. It's Zach LaVine. I know a lot of people did not like Zach LaVine leading up to this year. There was thoughts that, you couldn't win with him. They still haven't been proven to win a lot of games in Chicago with Zach LaVine, but he was an all-star this year. He was much better. At least I think he was an all-star this year. He was significantly improved statistically in terms of his impact on the game. He's a scorer. He's a ball handler. He can do everything you need in Philadelphia. He can be a guy who moves the ball around like Ben Simmons does, and he's not as good of a passer as Ben, but he's close enough in my opinion. And he can shoot. He can give you the shooting. He can give you the slashing. He can give you the dunks. He can give you all that stuff that Ben Simmons does much more moderately, or if not at all. I mean, he doesn't shoot threes. Zach LaVine certainly will pull. And he'll pull from deep 7 or 8 times a game, and he will have quarters where he's just unconscious. So you bring in someone like him, it should be a high priority for Philadelphia. His contract's very interesting because you get the 1 year that's kind of cheap, and you're going to have to extend him and probably give him a $30 million deal, similar to the one Ben Simmons has in the future. And you got Satoransky who will also come over in the situation to make the money work, and then you can let him walk in free agency. I think Satoransky would actually be a decent depth piece for Philadelphia. I'm not going to lie. I actually like him coming off the bench for them. And the draft value you might find questionable. I would totally agree with you. If it's just one first, that's fine. I think you can throw out the second first-round pick, which I really view as more of a pick swap than anything else. I view that 2023 first as kind of the right to have a pick swap. And I just put that in there as a placeholder in this situation. I could also see you just saying take Ben Simmons, take Shake Milton, take a first-round pick straight up for Satoransky and LaVine. And I do think because LaVine is very offensively versatile. He's not going to give you much in defense. And let me just tell you, you're not going to get better on defense by trading Ben Simmons. You're just not. Your defense is going to get worse. Your defensive rating is going to go down. But the issue was not necessarily your defense this year. It was your offense, your inability to score, your inability to have Ben Simmons on the court late in the game because he might get fouled and have to go to the free throw line, or because he's under the basket for an easy dunk and he passes it up to a player who only hits one or two of the fouls next because he doesn't get to make the shot. So it's just a situation where you have to give up some defense here in order to make a massive upgrade on your offense. Someone else who's been talked about quite a bit in these trade situations, someone like Brandon Ingram potentially. I don't think the Pelicans are going to bite for this. I really don't. It doesn't make a lot of sense. They're going to do what they have to do to keep Lonzo Ball around this summer. They just fired their coach. They're going to try to run it back, I believe, with guys like Ingram, Ball, and Zion Williamson being the core of their team going forward. They also have Steve Adams there, who I think they're more likely to trade someone like Eric Bledsoe, but I don't think the 76ers will be interested in someone like that. And from a contract perspective, this is much easier than trying to trade for Eric Bledsoe. So in this situation, you basically have Thibault, Simmons, a first-round pick. You could throw out the first-round pick if you want to, now that I'm looking at it. Or you could say that's a pick swap, however you want to view that second first-round pick. For Ingram and Josh Hart is a free agent. I put this in as like a sign-and-trade, a 3-year deal worth about $8.8 million per year, somewhere in that range, $8 million per year. Because Josh Hart said he would like a fresh start. Now, he said that before Van Gundy was fired, so maybe he'll stick around now, but I think Josh Hart wants to be somewhere else next year. And going to Philadelphia, it's a two-way player, outside shooter, someone you could need, or someone you could use in Philadelphia when you have Joel Embiid on the interior. So this is an option for Philly. I think Brandon Ingram, certainly because of what he does just all around the court, his improved three-point shooting, all that kind of stuff would really make him a versatile option for the 76ers, even if his defense has never gotten to the point that maybe people hoped it would. And for the Pelicans, taking Thibault in return, giving you a defensive piece who is much better than Josh Hart was defensively. And Josh Hart is somewhat of a 3-and-D player. I think his defense has kind of fallen off a little bit recently, but Thibault is certainly a defensive upgrade for the Pelicans. I do have another Brandon Ingram trade here. This one's straight up Brandon Ingram for Ben Simmons, a first-round pick, and a top 10 protected first-round pick. Now, this might seem a little extreme, but you have to think about this. Ben Simmons' trade value is at an all-time low. Brandon Ingram is significantly better offensive scorer, and he can do a little bit of everything for you on offense, especially shoot from outside. Ben Simmons just won't do that. So you have to consider, what is Ben Simmons' true trade value? And that's why it's very difficult to put together these trade scenarios today. It was very difficult because I don't know what Ben Simmons' trade value is at this point. If you would ask me going into the year, I would have said, wow, it's really high. It's a defensive player caliber player. This is a guy who can command multiple first-round picks in the trade. Now, if we're talking about him potentially not even being a top 25 player after the playoffs, what do you do? Where do you put him here? And where do you put Brandon Ingram in this conversation? So it was something that I would have to spend a lot more time on if I was to get everything exactly right. So this might be a little off. And again, I said, I'm just trying to start a conversation here. I'm not trying to give you what should happen. I'm just trying to give you ideas, trying to put some stuff in your mind, maybe get a few comments out there, and maybe get a little bit of discussion started in the comment section or on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Sam_Teats33. But again, maybe not an exactly perfect trade, but something that you should just at least consider. And Ben Simmons at this point, I'm underselling him today. I'm going to be honest. I am underselling Ben Simmons today just because of what happened last night and what's happened throughout this entire series. Another potential trade option for an offensive-minded player, D'Angelo Russell, who has been banged up and injured in Minnesota. And I know the Timberwolves want to keep him around because why would you trade for him in the first place and pair him with Karl-Anthony Towns, a guy who gets along with, if you didn't want to have him there long-term? So I think they're going to keep D'Angelo Russell around. I don't think this will happen, but I think this is certainly an option Philadelphia has to look at because he's a young player, 2 years left on his contract, a decent contract for all things considered. Russell has dealt with injuries in the past, but when he's healthy, he's a great ball handler. He's a decent facilitator. He can score. He's not going to give you the defensive capabilities of Ben Simmons, but I think this is something you have to consider here. And in this trade case, because D'Angelo Russell is not, in my mind, on the same level as some of the guys we talked about already, I could see it being Ben Simmons and just a pick swap or something like that for a first rounder. I don't think it has to be an unprotected first to get a guy like D'Angelo Russell. Maybe it's Ben Simmons, a pick swap in the first round, and maybe a couple of seconds. I don't think you have to add as much into this discussion to get D'Angelo Russell as you would in some of the other scenarios. Next on the list, I'll go with Kyle Lowry. Let's do a Lowry take. Lowry's obviously going to be a free agent this year, but I think you could do a sign and trade for him potentially because the Raptors are going to work with him in the situation. The Raptors and him have a very strong relationship. I could see him signing a deal maybe 3 years, given his age, maybe 2 years, worth about $30 to $33 million per year, in which case he will be in Philadelphia for the short-term future, but enough period of time where you think you can build team chemistry and maybe make a title run. And there's actually been a report out there I saw just this morning that Daryl Morey might go after someone who's a higher caliber star than Kyle Lowry, which is understandable, but I don't know how you're going to swing that trade, given what Ben Simmons just did. And I don't think you want to mortgage your entire future draft-wise to get someone. But in this case, for Kyle Lowry, who's an aging star, who plays the game very differently than Ben Simmons, he's just not an ace in one particular area, but he does a little bit of everything. He does everything well, and he's a good leader, good character guy. I think trade Ben Simmons, trade potentially a first-round pick unprotected, maybe it's a pick swap, and some second-round picks as well. I think you could, now that I'm looking at this deal, I think maybe an unprotected first-round pick in 2022 or 2021 and a second-round pick in the other year would be much more favorable here. And again, one of the reasons why it's not more than this is because Kyle Lowry is up there in age and you are expecting some kind of decline eventually, which is why I think you don't have to throw in too much value here for Kyle Lowry. Next up, someone like CJ McCollum. I think this is a much more likely trade than trading for Damian Lillard because McCollum is not an all-star. He's kind of that second-tier player. Ben Simmons at this point is a tier 2, tier 3 player. I don't really know. He's probably close to McCollum. So now I'm looking at this deal. I think you can knock out that first-round pick potentially. Don't even include that because these are just screenshots I'm playing up, by the way, not the actual deals themselves, so I can't edit them in real time. But now that I'm looking at this, I think you might want to remove the first-round pick or maybe make it a pick swap instead of just making an unprotected first-round pick. But trading for someone like McCollum who's got some defensive value, not fantastic on defense, but he has some defensive value, and he can score from the outside. Obviously, he's a great three-point shooter, can slash a little bit, decent ball handler. There's a bunch of stuff you can bring in and do with McCollum, so I think he's a guy you might want to look at, and he'll give you not the true point guard that you really need, but he'll give you a shooting guard, point guard hybrid potentially, somebody who can handle the ball a lot in the era of positionless basketball while still being more of a primary shooting guard. So there's some value there. And again, you would have to play around with the trade a little bit. I don't know if you want to do an unprotected first-round pick for this or maybe pick swaps or maybe top 10 protected in the future for a future first-round pick. I don't know about that, but you would have to play around and see what you like most in those kind of scenarios. And so something like that, you can also do a deal potentially for De'Aaron Fox where, and this is something that I don't think will happen because the Kings like their young players, even though the Kings never go anywhere with any of their young guys. Something like De'Aaron Fox could be traded for a guy like Ben Simmons, but it will take a lot because the Kings put a high amount of value on De'Aaron Fox and his future as a potential top 15, top 20 star in the league. He's going to be one of the best point guards in the league for a while. I personally have a lot of faith in De'Aaron Fox's ability to develop. Even though his three-point game has not reached that high level yet, I think he will get there at some point. And I really like his ability as a slasher. Listen to the slasher. He's great at driving to the rim. He's great at facilitating. I like a lot of things he does. Defensively, he can get you the steals you want and go the other way for 2 or potentially and 1 in transition. So I really like what De'Aaron Fox brings to the table. And because the Kings value their guys so much, I think you would have to trade Ben Simmons and a first-round pick and maybe even more, like a protected first-round pick or pick swaps in this case, like here. That would have to be a protected pick or pick swaps because the Kings put a lot of value in De'Aaron Fox, and they're not going to want to trade for Ben Simmons. It just does not make sense to make that deal unless they're getting something extra in return. and they're willing to blow it up because, frankly, the Kings just might have to blow it up. They're just the Kings at this point, man. There's nothing much more I can add to this conversation other than they are continuing to struggle because they are the Sacramento Kings. The Pacers, I think there's some interesting deals you can make for the Indiana Pacers because of the contracts they have on their roster and how they match up with the contracts that the 76ers have on their roster. So in this deal, you get Malcolm Brogdon, a good two-way ball handler who can do a little bit of everything. Again, another jack of all trades, master of none. Jeremy Lamb, a good outside shooter. And you send Ben Simmons, Shake Milton there, and multiple picks. Only one first rounder, a bunch of second rounders as well in compensation. I think this is actually a decent deal. Maybe knock out a second round pick or two in this situation because you're not trading for a superstar, but the Pacers value Malcolm Brogdon more than they would value a player like Ben Simmons because Brogdon, like I said, does everything for them and can score from all different levels. And someone like Jeremy Lamb is going to see more minutes in most teams than someone like Shake Milton. So you're actually looking at a situation where you're asking the Pacers to part ways with the player they probably like more than Ben Simmons and Malcolm Brogdon, and you're asking for them to part ways with a guy who's going to see more playing time than someone like Shake Milton. So you're going to have to offer value in return. I think a first-round pick would have to go in this deal, even if you don't agree with me. I think a first-round pick at the minimum has to go, along with maybe a second-round pick. So maybe you can knock out one or two of these second-rounders, but at the same time, I still think it has to be Simmons, Milton, and at least a first-rounder if you're going to do a deal for Lamb and Brogdon. Let me see. I think I have two more left here. So these are like the least desirable ones in my opinion. You can trade for Kevin Love. I think you could do a trade for Kevin Love with a pick swap, honestly, or maybe just a second-round pick even. And it says most favorable projected here. This is really just my way of putting a placeholder in as a pick swap or a second-round pick. I could have put a second-round pick in there because Kevin Love might fit what you're trying to do in Philadelphia because he'll play outside, he'll shoot threes, he'll do a lot of stuff like that. He'll do a lot of the little stuff the same way he did when he was in his prime in Cleveland playing alongside LeBron and Kyrie. The issue becomes, it's a shorter contract. So you can get out of the contract easier for Kevin Love. I don't know how much he wants to play basketball anymore because he's kind of had the soul sucked out of him in Cleveland a little bit. I don't know what the ceiling for a guy like Kevin Love is at this point in his career. Yeah, like I said, there's just so many questions here, which is why I don't think this is a favorable trade for Philadelphia because you don't know what player you're getting in return. You know what Kevin Love was in his prime. You know what he was when he was playing with LeBron and Kyrie. But you don't really know when he's putting on a good team now what he'll be capable of doing. You just don't know. So this is a little bit of an unfavorable trade, but I think it's something you have to consider. And we'll see. I think there's a lot of our pieces, a lot of our smaller pieces on the Cleveland Cavaliers team that get thrown in the trade as well. But I don't think if we're doing a deal for Kevin Love, who really doesn't want to be in Cleveland anymore, and we've seen it multiple times, his relationship with the Cavaliers is just broken. Maybe even Philadelphia gets picks in this situation. Maybe it's not the 76ers sending picks. Maybe it's the Cavs sending picks. Who knows? I mean, it really could be anything. But the Cavs do have a lot of young guards in their roster, which is why I think I had pick go from Philly to Cleveland here is because there's really no reason for the Cavaliers to trade for Ben Simmons, given their young players and guys like Darius Garland and Colin Sexton who are already playing point guard or playing shooting guard on their roster because they have those young guys at that position, and they might like those players more than Ben Simmons. In the final trade, I'm sure everyone in Philadelphia would tear him apart because he got blamed a lot in Dallas, got blamed a lot in New York. It's Kristaps Porziņģis. And in this situation, I think the Mavericks are going to be sending a 76ers draft capital for Ben Simmons. Now, does this work at all? Probably not because Luka Doncic is a point guard. So in this situation, Ben Simmons has to play small forward or power forward for this really to make any sense whatsoever. But a guy like Kristaps Porziņģis, again, similar to what you would get in a trade for a guy like Kevin Love, someone who'd be like a secondary scorer, someone who'd be beyond the three-point arc, a stretch 4, stretch 5. And Kristaps Porziņģis, he's 7'3". People forget it. He's pretty good at protecting the rim just because of his size and athleticism, even though he didn't show it this past year. Previously, he had been a very good rim protector. So I think you have to consider some of that. You have to look into how much he wants to play to make money versus how much he wants to play to win. Because there's obviously some issues in Dallas playing the second fiddle to Luka Doncic, and if that's the case, he's never going to work alongside Joel Embiid. It just won't be possible because Joel Embiid is clearly much better than Kristaps Porziņģis. And I think I kept mispronouncing clearly there. I don't know why, but it suddenly sounds so weird when I'm saying that word. But Kristaps Porziņģis has to accept the second fiddle role in Philadelphia, and if he's unable to do that, there's no point in trading for him. And also, again, for the Mavericks, this just makes sense. I mean, Ben Simmons is obviously has all the physical tools to be a great talent, but he has to be on ball in transition for a lot of that to work. And I don't know if that pairs well with Luka Doncic. I really don't think it does. So again, this trade and the one for Cleveland don't make a lot of sense to me, but it's something that you could pursue or something you'll probably see tossed around at least a little bit this offseason. Again, I'm just planting little seeds in your mind, trying to get you to think about some of this stuff. I don't necessarily think you have to put a lot of value in what I'm saying, but just consider some of these things, toss them over in your mind, and maybe leave a comment. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me if you agree with any of these trades or any of these trade scenarios. How would you edit them? What would you change? Is there anyone I didn't mention that you would target, or is there anyone that I mentioned that you just think is so obscene that you would never, ever agree to do a trade like that?